From the lowest to the highest, from the furthest to the nearest, from the smallest of the smallest to the greatest of the greatest, yoga is about all of life, everything we do, all of existence. My name's James Bogue. Welcome to the Whole Life Yoga Podcast. So, are you really practicing yoga? Do I actually practice yoga? So I tried to have a title for the video that might be a little bit more alluring for people who haven't engaged with my content before. If you do like it, please do share and like and all those types of things to try to invite more people to encounter it. But this question of what a yoga practice is, I think is a very useful question to consider. One of the terms in the yoga tradition that's used to describe practice is sādhana. What does sādhana mean? It has many significant connotations. One way it can be understood is sadhana are those actions that we do daily, that we consecrate daily, such that we keep our life oriented on the path of practice, in the direction of our soul's deeper and authentic longing more easily. During the day-to-day, our awareness is like to be pulled hither and thither in many different directions. So sadhana, there's the idea that if I'm skillful about it, I'm going to dedicate a certain portion of the day in a consecrated activity which is going to help me make the rest of the day yoga more easily. And this is a key idea. Sometimes when people hear, it's something you have to do every day, but I don't know if I've got time I can't give 6 hours of my day to yoga techniques. That's not what yoga practice is. Practice and technique, not the same things. The idea of a yoga technique is that it's going to train us such that it's easier to keep the rest of the day as a type of yoga practice. Yoga practice is defined most beautifully in the Yoga Sutra. Patanjali tells us, Patanjali is the sage who bequeathed us this Yoga Sutra text. He says, practice is the effort for the sake of steadiness. Practice is the effort to foster steadiness. And that effort is long-term, uninterrupted, wholehearted, attended to with genuine presence, with devotion, with dedication. And then that practice will become well-rooted, so it can grow. It will become well-rooted, so it is robust, so it can withstand storms and torments and times of trial. In order for it to become very well-rooted, the previous part of the definition is really important. This long-term, uninterrupted, wholehearted, dedicated. So the idea is a sadhana is something we do in a very regular way, without break, that we can do in a wholehearted, whole system way. It's something that we can give ourselves to. Because what is yoga all about? Yoga means joining, connecting. In the Bhagavad Gita, for example, in chapter 2, the distillation of the whole teaching, there's this beautiful concept that is very emphasized as Krishna begins his teaching. And he says that the yogin, or the yoga practitioner, cultivates this state of being buddhi yuktaha. Yukta means joined, connected to buddhi, to that most discerning part of our awareness. How do we bring ourselves into this buddhi yukta state? By joining all the parts of ourself, by bringing all the parts into togetherness under the leadership of the buddhi, the most discerning part of our awareness. So there's this beautiful illustration of this. It's given in the Upaniṣadic, but it's evoked or echoed at several places in the Bhagavad Gita. and several other places in the yoga teachings. And there's the idea that this bodily vehicle is like a chariot. The owner is our soul, the Atman in Sanskrit, that deepest essential part of ourself. And the charioteer, the driver, we want the driver to be the buddhi, the discerning awareness, that subtlest part of our internal awareness that makes decisions, that discerns, that discriminates. The manas, sometimes people call it the mind, that part of our internal awareness that's kind of the gateway. It sits between the internal powers of awareness and the sense powers with which we interact with the external reality. This manas, this mind, this should be the reins. And the horses pulling the chariot, these horses, they are our 5 sense powers and our 5 action capacities of speech and communication, expression, of shaping, forming, picking up, putting down, of movement and locomotion, of digestion, assimilation, and excretion, elimination, and our creative capacities. So we have these 10 indriyani, these 10 indriyas, these 10 amazingly powerful capacities, like horsepower. What type of animal is a horse? It's a powerful animal, yeah? If we want to be buddhi yuktaha, it means our horses are yoked. But if you want to yoke our horses, it doesn't mean fasten a yoke to their neck. No. If we want our horses to really be able to function as a unit, to support us in our hour of need, to carry us on the whole journey of life, then we have to train them with tremendous love and respect. We don't train horses skillfully by using excessive force or coercion. Are these 10 horses the same? Can we train them all in the same way? No. We need to use discernment. We need to use loving presence. When we bring that loving presence, that respectful attitude to each of the horses, then we can cultivate this relationship of trust. And then they will, more and more, gladly and joyfully serve us. And the idea in yoga is when we train these powers of our sense and action capacities to work together in service of the whole, in service of our deepest, most authentic longings, then they will actually come to recognize that they can relish, savor, taste their greatest joy, not when they follow their own isolated adventures, but when they work as this cohesive unit. And what is more, when they get used to that, when we train them in that way of working as a unit, then our horses, they will stay with us till the end. They won't fail us in our hour of need. If, however, we try and exploit them, we try and dominate them, we try and force them to do our egoic bidding, what's likely to happen is that overly forceful approach, it won't pan out so well in the long term. You might have heard that expression, that which does not kill me can only make me stronger. This is a very fanciful idea. Of course, there is some truth in it. Challenges can make us much stronger. But this is only a partial truth, because there are things that do not kill us that nonetheless can make us much weaker, can make us very fragile. And so when we're training the horses, we don't want to do that. We don't want to make them more fragile. We want to make them stronger. So yes, we must exercise them, we must challenge them, but in a caring, respectful way, with a view to the long-term well-being of the whole. And then, yes, we can fortify them by giving them the type of satisfying exercise that allows them to understand that they have greater capacity than they might previously have realized, but doesn't exhaust them, doesn't overburden them. So this is a key ingredient in sādhana, in yoga practice. Yoga practice means training all the members of the gang of our being to function as this cohesive unit in such a way that we can deepen our self-trust. That the different powers which reside within this bodily vehicle, they get to know each other more intimately, more deeply. They get to trust each other more intimately, more deeply. And they can support each other in this mutual, complementary way through greater and greater challenges as the path of practice deepens and continues. So sadhana, it doesn't just mean doing the same thing every day, because there's a big difference between practice and routine. Practice may mean doing the same thing every day, but we'll probably have to do it slightly differently every day if it's genuine practice, because genuine practice is fostering greater cohesion, greater integration. So how do we go about a yoga practice? How can we bring ourselves into this more joined up, integrated state? Traditionally, the most foundational practice is meditation. And the idea is that it's kind of essential if we want to connect to Source and disconnect from the clutter and chaos of our conditioned perspectives. If we want to attenuate the grip of our attachments to these fleeting externals that will never bring us lasting peace or satisfaction, if you want to bathe in the deeply nourishing influence of our deathless essence, then we have to allow ourselves some quiet, some stillness, some silence. Turning inwards and disconnecting from the superficial busyness. When we are busy at the surface, then the mind is very perturbed and we cannot access the peace of our depths. So some time in silence every day has for thousands of years been seen to be an essential part of the foundation of yoga practice. And it's one that's, I think, sometimes overlooked today. And that's kind of ironic because the need for that is perhaps even greater because the world we live in is busier and busier with more and more stimulus. And hence, if we can find the discipline and the presence to actually invite some regular stillness, silence, quiet, traditionally every morning and every evening, it can make such a huge difference in our day-to-day experience. Now, the other foundational idea that we've already touched on is, am I becoming a more skillful charioteer? Is this sadhana helping me live in a more buddhi-yukta state? Is it helping me live able to draw on my horsepower, on the power of my senses, the power of my action capacities, all these intelligences that I'm imbued with? Do I have access to them? And so in yoga practice, the other foundation is that whatever we're doing, we do it with all of ourselves. So when we drop into that quiet space, when we cultivate the Medi-state, we drop into a quiet meditative practice, we invite some stillness and some silence. There's the idea that when we do so, we allow all those powers, all those different intelligences to settle down together. And having settled down together, then they can move into activity with more ease, in a more integrated state. One way we might think of it is that when we invite that silence, that stillness, then we can hear the chord or the note to which all the different powers, all the different instrumental powers can then attune. So then, rather than going out and acting, each playing their own tune, they can go out and act like an orchestra, and they can be symphonic. They can help us live with more virtuosity, with more panache, with more flavorful expression, because we're drawing on more of our capacities. So sadhana, something we do every day to cultivate deepening togetherness. And as I've suggested, some quiet time, ideally more than once a day. It doesn't have to be for a particularly long period of time. This is so potent. Just giving ourselves a bit of silence. And in the yoga tradition, we have so many ways you can do this, so many supports for meditative practice, whether we are paying attention to the natural phenomena of the breath, or we're working with subtle sensory objects like a mantra or a visualization, for example. There are thousands of possibilities. But we can also just very simply drop into quiet, experience the body, experience the elements within and around. Many, many options. And then, how can I build upon that foundation element of that quiet time, even if it's only for a few moments? What I would suggest is it can be helpful to consider for a moment the recipe that we find in Hatha Yoga texts, for example, for those who would be full-time yoga practitioners. People 1,000 years ago, they lived in a peaceful place. There was no conflict around them. They had abundant food in a land of plenty around them, clean water. They could live a very simple life in the forest. And how did they spend their days? Before the dawn, they would begin with meditative practices. Meditation, pranayama, working with the breath, prayer, mantra, these types of practice. As the sun rises, one does some physical practices, some asana practices, working more dynamically with the energy circuits of the body, inviting energy and information to flow smoothly through all the different channels and circuits of the body. A full-time practitioner will repeat such a regime towards the end, in the golden hour. And then as the sun sets, will also be dropping deep into that quiet meditative state. It's altogether possible around the middle of the day. They will do another session, another period where they're devoting to internal, subtle meditative practices. But what does the traditional Hatha Yoga full-time practitioner do in the morning and the afternoon and the evening, when they're not doing these 3 periods of working with techniques? They study the scriptures, they study the shastras, the codified bodies of knowledge, the Indic arts and sciences that teach us about reality, teach us how to inhabit it skillfully. And in the afternoon and evening, they study the Puranas, and the Itihasa, the great stories, the mythology of the Indian tradition, and they sing bhajans. Now, when we hear this, then, well, I don't have time to do 6 hours of technique a day. I don't have time to be reading the Puranas every day. I've got to look after my children. I've got to go to work. Yes. However, when we consider this traditional recipe, there's something more I would suggest archetypal or foundational or structural about it that can be super helpful for us when we consider our own practice, our own sadhana in the world today. Notice that traditional recipe has quiet time, and it works with the rhythm of the day. So the active movement isn't done in the dark, it's done when the sun's coming up and before it goes down. There is time to nourish the intellect. There is time to nourish the heart. So those practices of singing bhajans, this is a more emotional thing. There's time also, when you're doing these ceremonies, when you're doing these ceremonial practices of meditation and offering into the fire and singing the mantras, you have to clean the space. So there is time for the simple mundane activity, but there are also times when we are stimulating the intellect, we are reflecting, we're inquiring, we're studying, we're working with others, we're working by ourselves. So this is the thing that I would say is really useful to consider and then apply in a very pragmatic way in the context of our own life. We might recognize I only have a few minutes that I can dedicate to technique or what feels like yoga practice time. But if we're actually practicing yoga, the whole idea is when we work with technique, it's just training us to bring that whole system engagement, that joined up, gathered, integrated state into the rest of the day. So one way we can do this is stacking. Not multitasking, but stacking. So for example, I could realize every day I might like to get outside in the sunlight and move my body, and I might like to have some sense of connection with other human beings. And I might also like to sing a little bit every day, just for example. So what we could do is 3 mornings a week with my friend, we can go out for a walk or a run or do some simple yogic movements, some gathering energy practices under the rising sun, and we can do it together. So I'm getting the time outside, I'm getting that nourishing exercise, I'm getting that exposure to the elements, and I'm doing it with somebody else. So I'm stimulating my body, my senses, my receptivity to the energy and the natural rhythms of life. I'm also getting that dose of human interaction. I'm fostering human connection that's not about ideas, but it's deeper than ideas. It's co-creating, we're practicing together. So something simple like this can be nourishing on so many levels all at the same time. And this is one thing to consider when we're designing a practice. If, for example, we really like doing yogasana, we might consider, if I did it outside, maybe I could do an outdoor practice sometimes. Then I get more of that other nourishment of being outside. If, for example, I have to sit inside an office for my job, I need more time outside. What about seated meditation? If I notice that I've been sitting all day at work, the last thing I want to do when I come home is sit still. Maybe I can learn to do a walking meditation or a standing meditation. And then when I come to sit, I feel ready to sit again, for example. So yoga is always very pragmatic. And the idea is we are not here to serve practice techniques. The practice techniques should serve us. So it's not that every day I have to do something slavishly, no. But every day, can I do something to divinize my awareness, to attune to that vaster way of seeing, to disconnect from my limiting conditionings and to connect to the essence, to that part of me beyond, before and beneath all my different ideas of limitation and separation. And it's like, if I do this every day, it will make a real difference. The chariot will move along the highways and byways of life in such a way that I can drink deeper from the cup of life. I can come to the end of the day feeling more satisfied, more fulfilled. How? Why? Because I've met each unfolding of that day with more of myself. And this is one of the secrets of active yoga practice. To do what we're doing wholly with all of ourselves, so we leave no space for regret, for coulda, shoulda, woulda, because we know we did it fully, we gave it our all. And so it's complete. We live it fully, and then it's done. It doesn't leave this sticky residue. So we become less attached and more free to meet each unfolding moment as it is. So sadhana, I would suggest, there's a lot more one could say about sadhana, but basic ingredients to remember: is it nourishing me? in my wholeness? Is it nourishing all parts of myself? And if it is, then it might actually be a yoga practice. So I hope that was useful in some ways. If you did find it useful, relevant, enjoyable, please do like, please do share, please do subscribe. Leave a 5-star review if you feel inclined to. And if you would like to explore building a holistic, deeply nourishing and sustainable yoga practice, I recommend signing up for my newsletter, which you can do via my website. And I'm currently teaching an online course on the Bhagavad Gita. But when this course culminates, I will be offering a longer course, and that course will really be focusing on building this holistic vision of yoga practice to support us in all aspects of life.